Well, the Financial Times is reporting Donald Trump asked Zelensky in a phone call if he could hit Moscow in order to make Putin feel pain. I mean, this is a major reversal of his previous non interventionist stance, but President Donald Trump apparently urged Zelensky to strike deep into Russian territory, including Moscow and St. Petersburg, if the U.S. provides long range weapons. This apparently happened during a 4th of July call between Trump and Zelensky, which was one day after what Trump described as a bad conversation with Putin. And according to two sources who were briefed on the call, Trump directly asked, Voldemar, can you hit Moscow? Can you hit St. Petersburg too? And Zelensky responded with, absolutely, we can if you give us the weapons. Trump appeared supportive of the idea, apparently saying the goal was to make them, which would be the Russians, feel the pain and push the Kremlin to negotiate. He thinks this is a negotiation tactic. Bombing Moscow would be a negotiation tactic. That's what he's thinking. After the call, U.S. officials then shared a list of long-range weapons with Zelensky when they were in Rome in a meeting, and this included options for third-party transfers, which would bypass congressional approval. Weapons discussed included Tomahawk missiles and ATACMS, which are the Army tactical missile systems. And I mean, this is just really appalling. I'm not sure what happened to the anti-war Trump, but this isn't it. Russia has since, of course, come out issuing warnings, with Putin saying, we will respond just as decisively and symmetrically. Also, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev dismissed Trump, saying he actually wrote, Trump issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin. Russia didn't care. This is what Donald Trump had to say about Putin. You know, him basically saying, look, my phone calls with him are unproductive. I thought they were productive. They weren't productive. And I guess this is his justification for going towards, let's bomb Moscow. Watch this.
Speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything. My conversations with him are always very pleasant. I say, isn't that a very lovely conversation? And then the missiles go off that night. I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look, he's, I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy. It's been proven over the years. He's fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me. But what I do say is that at a certain point, ultimately talk doesn't talk. It's got to be action. It's got to be results. And I hope he does it. It's potentially such a great country to be wasting so many people on this and the money. And look at what's happened to his economy. Look at what's happened. So,
and with the threat in 50 days,
yeah,
the economy will be hit very hard.
I mean, look, I hope he's going to do it. He knows the deal. He knows what a fair deal is. If there is such a thing as a fair deal, there's no winners here. This is a loser. This is a loser. And I dealt with him from the beginning. It wouldn't have happened, but I will say Ukraine was the apple of his eye. We talk about it. It was the apple of his eye, but it wasn't going to happen. And he understood that. It wasn't going to happen. And then I noticed, after I was out, I noticed soldiers forming at the border.
Yeah.
And then I heard horrible, stupid things being said from the other side. And I said, they're really handling it very, very wrong. It's a shame.
I mean, it would be nice for us to know exactly what he thinks Putin needs to negotiate on specifically. I think many of us were under the impression that Trump agreed with Putin on pretty much all the points that Putin had, as far as why he entered into this war, what he wanted as a result of the war, and which was, for one, NATO cannot be encroaching. Ukraine has to be neutral. You can't be arming Ukraine. We're going to keep the land that we already have. We're not giving it back. I mean, I feel like we were getting reports that Trump had agreed on all of that. And so it would be nice to know when he says that he has these conversations with Putin and he thinks that they're going well, and then suddenly the next day Russia bombs Kiev. It would be nice to know what exactly is he asking of Putin specifically. We get all of these agreements that are being proposed to, let's say, Hamas, but we're not getting the agreement specifically that is being proposed to Putin. So we can then, we the people, decide whether or not Putin is being reasonable or if he's being a madman. And it's kind of important for we the people to know this, considering we the people are the ones who are supposed to declare war. If we're going to go to war, if we're going to allow Zelensky with our weapons to bomb Moscow, if the American president is asking Zelensky, can you hit Moscow? Can you hit St. Petersburg? And then in a month or so, Zelensky does it. That is an act of war coming from the United States to Russia, and Russia knows that. So it would be us waging war with Russia. And what do you think the outcome would be? Do you think that Putin would say, well, it wasn't you, it was Zelensky who did it, even though you gave him the weapon and you planted the idea and you gave him the green light? No, it's obviously an act of war between the United States and Russia. And shouldn't it be something that we the people decide on? Shouldn't we the people be saying, you know what? Yeah, Putin's a madman. I guess you're just going to have to go after the guy because he's just not going to stop at Ukraine. He wants all of Europe. He wants everything. And so with that, I guess, go ahead and start bombing Moscow, make him feel that pain and see if he'll come to the negotiation table. Okay, so Donald Trump later then said, he kind of backtracked on this when he was quickly asked whether or not Ukraine should target Moscow. This is what he said.
Moscow. Should Zelensky target Moscow, sir? Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
You notice how the reporter had to ask twice and Trump had to kind of lean in. I think he was thinking, I think he heard that guy. I think he heard him. And I think he was thinking about how should I respond to this? Should I say, yeah, it'll make him feel pain and maybe he'll come to the negotiation table because I can't get him to move in any other way. Or, I mean, it's possible, I suppose, that he didn't hear him, but that's not, Trump usually can hear these reporters just fine. It's not like he's got a hearing problem. I understand that the helicopter was going on around him, but he's never had a problem otherwise. So I have a little suspicion that he was thinking about how should I answer this? And I mean, the big question I think is, would that even matter if we were to bomb Moscow? Because make no mistake, it would be we, right? It's not just Zelensky, it's the United States, NATO that would be in on doing that. If we were to bomb Moscow, if we were to bomb St. Petersburg, what would be Russia's response? Do you think Putin would say, okay, time out. I call uncle. Okay. Let's do a truce. Let's go to the negotiation table and let's hammer out a deal that we don't even know what the parameters or what the asks are for that deal. Do you think that is exactly how Putin would respond? Or do you think he would say, no, I don't need to kowtow down to you because I've got more nukes than you. Don't you know who's the leading nuclear power in the world? It's actually Russia. So, and Russia has a lot of military presence all around the world. They've got a lot of allies. There's a lot of countries that increasingly do not like the United States and increasingly think the United States is a bully. So how do we think this would, this is, the madman sounds like Trump. Is Putin talking about bombing Washington? Is he saying, I'm going to bomb Washington? Maybe we should just bomb Washington in order to get Washington to come to the negotiation table on terms we like. Because Putin's at the table to some degree. It's just, these aren't, whatever the terms are, he doesn't like the terms. So he could reverse it and say, well, I'm going to bomb Washington, or I'm going to bomb New York, or I'm going to bomb wherever, the middle of Oklahoma, because until I can get Washington to stop funding and arming Ukraine. And I think a lot of people would say that's actually reasonable because it's the United States and NATO who are funding Ukraine and arming Ukraine. Ukraine wouldn't be able to keep up this fight without the help of the United States and NATO. So it wouldn't be a stretch for Moscow to say, yeah, we're actually at war with you. And in order to get you to stop doing what you're doing, which is providing our enemy with a bunch of weapons to target us, we're going to target you to get you to bring you to your knees rather than the other way around. Would that work? Would that even work? Russia's not even threatening that. So who's the madman here? Is it Donald Trump who's the madman saying, can you bomb Moscow? I mean, he's saying to Zelensky, who does actually seem sort of like a legitimate madman. And he's saying to Zelensky, who really, the reason he's a madman is because he should have negotiated this out from the very beginning. At the very beginning of the war, Zelensky should have just said to Putin, we are your friend, we are your brothers, we are one people, and we will not side with NATO and allow NATO to encroach onto this territory. We will remain neutral. We don't want to be part of the West. We are fundamentally Russians. and Soviets and, or, whatever. And so, of course, we're going to make peace with our very large nuclear brother. But instead, Zelensky, a madman, decides to continue forward. And here we are. And they haven't gained a single thing from this war. They have gained absolutely nothing. They haven't gained any territory. They've only continued to lose territory. Even if it's slow, they've still lost inch after inch after inch of territory. They've been losing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not, some reports say 1 million soldiers. They're dipping into soldiers who are out of shape and over the age, and they're dipping it, and they're having to literally grab them off the streets as they try running for safety. They're roping them into the war. They're losing people. They're losing territory. They're bleeding their economy dry, because that the United States is not really giving them all of these weapons for free. It's all coming at a cost, which is maybe why the U.S. keeps doing it, because now we get to siphon more resources and own huge swaths of Ukraine. So they're just losing and losing and losing. And Zelensky doesn't have the common sense to stop and say, all right, waving the white flag. You're our bigger neighbor. The United States is not only all the way across Europe, but all the way across the Atlantic Ocean on top of it. The United States isn't anywhere close to Ukraine. And so why Zelensky thinks he could cozy up to the United States and mean mug Russia is beyond me. That is just the inner workings of a madman. So who is the crazy person here? Is it Donald Trump, who's threatening to bomb Moscow and without our consent as the American people, just like he bombed Iran without the consent of the American people? We have the right to decide if we are going to go to war. We have the right to decide whether or not it is worth going to World War III over. Is Ukraine worth World War III to you? Is Israel worth World War III to you? Because that is what our government has decided, that these countries you just have never been to, you don't know anything about, you're never going to go to, these countries are the ones that are allowed to march us into World War III, risking the lives of Americans, risking our economies, risking our livelihoods, risking our quality of life, risking the American dream. And we're all supposed to just say, yeah, we're going to go along with it. And whatever Trump says without our consent, it's just fine. The anti-war president has literally now bombed Iran and threatened Moscow. This is absolute and complete, utter insanity. There is one person in Congress, one of the few people in Congress who's sane, and actually, funny enough, is Marjorie Taylor Greene. A lot of people thought Marjorie Taylor Greene was the insane one, but it turns out she's actually quite sane. She has attempted to block the weapons sales to Ukraine. This is what she said. She also tried to get the Epstein files released. And she says the same Republicans in the Rules Committee who blocked the release of the Epstein files last night also blocked my amendment to transfer munitions to Ukraine, a non-NATO member nation. She's the only one with any common sense. She says MAGA delivered the majority to Republicans and voted for no more U.S. involvement in foreign wars. But now the neocons and establishment Republicans have hijacked MAGA. As a reminder, in September 2023, I forced the separate vote on the $300 million in the DoD approps for Ukraine. Here's the vote record result. Republicans, yay, 101 for funding to Ukraine. Nay, 117 against funding for Ukraine. Democrats, the supposed anti-war party, yay, 210 for funding to Ukraine. Nay, 0 against funding to Ukraine. So Republicans, 101 Republicans sided with Democrats for funding Ukraine. And there was only 117 who said, we're not interested in this. The supposedly, we don't want any more foreign wars, MAGA Republicans said, actually 101 of them just threw that away and said, yeah, screw the people and what they want. We're going to war. She says funding war in foreign countries is not what we voted for, and America funds NATO. So if NATO is buying American weapons, we are still paying for it, which she's partially correct there. The United States does heavily fund NATO, but every country does put in the money. And it is unclear at this point. It's unclear whether or not the directive. So this is when Donald Trump talked about when he was sitting there with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and he was saying NATO is going to start buying the weapons, and then NATO is going to transfer those weapons to Ukraine. It's unclear how exactly that money is going to, where the money is going to come from. So there's a couple of ways. What happens is NATO doesn't have like its own pot of money. So Marjorie Taylor Greene on this one is actually a little incorrect. And I think a lot of people are. So I did some research on this. NATO doesn't have like its own fund and then NATO buys weapons. NATO is just an alliance. And so each member country agrees to spending a certain amount of money on weapons. So the United States spends now $1 trillion a year on defense. Some reports say it's more like $1.5 trillion on defense, depending on how you crunch the numbers. So we spend $1.5 trillion on defense. Let's say that is a certain percentage of America's GDP. Then we look at Germany and we say, oh, you spent only X number of dollars on defense, and that is only 3% of your GDP. You need to up it to 5%. You need to spend more on war. They're on weapons, on purchasing weapons and on your defense. And basically NATO directs each of the countries to spend money. And then what they spend is not, NATO doesn't have a budget. Basically what I'm saying is that what they spend ends up being counted towards the overall, okay, yeah, you spent X number of dollars according to the NATO agreement on defense. The issue that Donald Trump has when it comes to NATO not spending enough money is these other countries. The issue is if a big war were to break out like World War III, then if the other countries have not been putting up their fair share towards defense, they will be inadequately defensible. Did I say that right? Right. So they would need their neighbors to come to their rescue essentially because they failed their part of the agreement, which was to at least arm themselves enough to defend themselves. And if countries neglect that obligation, then if a big war breaks out, then the other countries have to come and come to the rescue. And then the other countries could be mad and say, well, if you just would have been spending the money you were supposed to spend on your defense, then we wouldn't have needed to come to your rescue so quickly. You're supposed to also put in a certain amount of money. So that's what that really means. It's not that NATO has like a pot of gold and they're just spending money out of the collective pot of gold. It's actually each member nation has its own budget. The budget is supposed to be a certain percentage of their GDP. And if it's not, then Trump, which it hasn't been for most of the European countries, Trump then can squawk about it and say, spend more, spend more. So it's not really a America, like a money laundering scheme. It kind of is but it isn't directly. So it's not like the US government is funding NATO and then NATO is taking that money and spending it on weapons. And basically the United States just bought weapons, instead of NATO buying weapons. It's not really like that. But what it is Donald Trump pressuring all of these NATO countries to start buying weapons. Who do they buy weapons from? Well, of course, United States manufacturers. It comes from the United States military industrial complex. So it's a way for U.S. military industrial complex members to, for those large companies to essentially make more money. So it's not the United States spending and buying their own weapons. So it's not totally accurate. I hope I explained that correctly, but because that is a bit of a misconception on exactly how NATO is funded. There might be some small budget that NATO does share for certain things, I think mostly for like administration and whatnot. But when it comes to actual weapons and ammunitions and defense, that is up to each member nation. It's just Trump wants them to up their budget and buy more weapons from Lockheed Martin. But at the end, so back to the main point here is that Donald Trump has now bombed Iran and is now threatening to bomb Moscow, all under the pretense of peace, all while being nominated by Netanyahu for a Nobel Peace Prize. You cannot make this. This sounds like honestly, guys, this just sounds like I read it straight out of The Onion. We just read this straight out of The Onion, I guess. That's it. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.